This story might change how you see people forever. A 27-year-old maid submits her job application at the biggest company in the city. Is nervous. She's hopeful. This job means everything to her. Rent, food, her little brother's school fees. And then, right in front of her, without even reading it properly, the HR director rips it into pieces. Doesn't blink. Doesn't care. Just tears her dreams apart like it's nothing. The maid sits there, frozen, humiliated. And then the door opens. And the man who just walked in. He's about to change everything. But not in the way you're expecting. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I can't keep it to myself. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far this channel reaches. And if you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button because we tell stories like this every single week. Stories about love, injustice, and the moments that change everything. Hey, let's get into it. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, and Maya Sharma stood outside the tallest glass building in the city, clutching a single manila folder like it was the last thing keeping her afloat, because in a way it was. 27 years old. No degree from a fancy university. No connections. Just a woman who had spent the last 5 years cleaning other people's houses, raising her 13-year-old brother alone after their parents passed, and dreaming, quietly, secretly, of something more stable. Something with a steady paycheck. Something with dignity. She had heard about the opening through a friend who worked in the building's cafeteria. A position in the housekeeping and hospitality department of Harrison Enterprises. One of the most respected companies in the country. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't going to make her rich. But it came with benefits, a fixed salary, and, most importantly, stability. For a girl who had grown up watching her mother work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, stability wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline. Maya smoothed down her simple black dress, the only formal outfit she owned, and stepped through the revolving glass doors into a lobby so polished she could see her nervous reflection staring back at her. Marble floors. Chandeliers. Security guards in crisp uniforms who eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. She didn't belong here. She knew it. But she walked forward anyway, because sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the terrifying thing despite it. The elevator ride to the 17th floor felt like it took an hour. Maya's palms were sweating around the folder that contained her application, her references, and a handwritten cover letter she had rewritten 4 times the night before, trying to get every word exactly right. She had poured her heart into that letter. She had written about her work ethic, her reliability, her dream of finally giving her younger brother, Arjun, a life where he didn't have to worry about whether there would be dinner on the table. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by a receptionist who gave her a once-over and pointed toward a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. HR director's office. She's expecting applicants today. Maya nodded, thanked her, and walked down that long hallway with her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't know yet that behind those doors sat a woman named Victoria Harrison, a woman whose surname matched the company itself, because she wasn't just any HR director. She was engaged to Nathaniel Harrison, the 36-year-old CEO and heir to the entire Harrison empire. Victoria, 33, sharp-tongued and immaculately put together, had built a reputation in the office as someone who got things done, efficiently, ruthlessly, and without an ounce of sentimentality. What Maya also didn't know was that Victoria had been in a foul mood all morning. A wedding venue had cancelled on her. Her florist had sent the wrong sample bouquet. And worst of all, Nathaniel, her fiancé, had missed their breakfast meeting because of another emergency board call, which was becoming a pattern that made Victoria's blood boil in ways she refused to examine too closely. So when Maya knocked gently and stepped into that office, She walked straight into a storm she had no way of predicting. "Sit," Victoria said, not even looking up from her phone. Maya sat, folder trembling slightly in her lap. She waited and waited. The clock on the wall ticked with a cruelty that seemed designed to torture her. Finally, Victoria looked up, her eyes sweeping over Maya's simple dress, her calloused hands, the worn edges of her folder. There was no warmth in her expression, only a flicker of something like contempt. "Application," Victoria said, extending a manicured hand without so much as a greeting. Maya handed it over, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you so much for considering me. I've worked in housekeeping and hospitality for 5 years, and I really believe I could bring—" "I don't need the speech," Victoria cut her off, already flipping through the pages with visible disinterest. Maya's stomach twisted, but she kept her composure. She had learned, over years of thankless work, how to swallow her pride and keep going. This was just one more moment to get through. But what happened next she was not prepared for. Victoria's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at it, her jaw tightening as she read a message that made the color drain slightly from her face. Something about Nathaniel, something about a name Maya couldn't see. Whatever it said, it flipped a switch inside Victoria. Her eyes turned cold. Her hands, still holding Maya's carefully written application, began to shake, not with sadness but with fury. And in one swift, brutal motion, Victoria Harrison tore the papers in half. Maya gasped, half rising from her chair. "Wait, please, This position is filled," Victoria snapped, tearing the pages again, smaller and smaller, letting the shredded pieces fall onto her desk like snow made of someone else's hope. "Don't waste my time." Maya stared at the scraps of paper scattered across the mahogany desk. Her cover letter, her references, her carefully chosen words about her dreams for her brother, reduced to confetti in front of her eyes. Her throat tightened. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused, absolutely refused, to let them fall in front of this woman. "I worked really hard on that," Maya said quietly, her voice cracking despite her best efforts. "That was the only copy I had." Victoria didn't even look at her. "Then you should have been more careful." The cruelty of it hit Maya like a physical blow. She had walked in with hope. She was about to walk out with nothing, not even the paper proof of her effort. And that was the exact moment the office door swung open. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, composed, dressed in a deep red suit that somehow made the entire room feel smaller. His eyes moved first to the torn papers scattered across the desk, then to Maya's trembling hands, and finally, slowly, to Victoria. Something shifted in his expression. Something Maya couldn't read yet. "What," he said quietly, "is going on in here?" Maya had no idea that the man standing in that doorway was about to become the most important person in her life, for reasons that had nothing to do with pity, and everything to do with a truth none of them saw coming. Nathaniel Harrison did not raise his voice. He never needed to. There was something about the stillness in his tone that commanded a room more effectively than shouting ever could. A trait he'd inherited from his father, the company's founder, along with the empire itself. He stepped into the office, his eyes scanning the torn fragments of paper scattered across Victoria's desk like debris after a storm. Then he looked at the young woman sitting stiffly in the chair, her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed but dry, fighting with everything she had not to cry in front of strangers. "Victoria," he said again, his voice low. "What happened here?" Victoria straightened, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blazer, her composure snapping back into place with practiced ease. "Nothing important. Just an unqualified applicant. I was handling it." "Unqualified," Nathaniel repeated, walking further into the room. He picked up one of the torn scraps of paper from the desk, studying the fragmented handwriting on it. Neat, careful, clearly written with effort. "This looks like a cover letter." "It was," Maya said quietly, finally finding her voice. "For the housekeeping position." Nathaniel's eyes moved to her fully now, taking her in. Not with the dismissiveness Victoria had shown, but with something closer to genuine attention. "And she tore it up in front of you." Maya hesitated, glancing at Victoria, unsure if answering honestly would cost her even the smallest chance she had left. But something about the way this man was looking at her, steady, patient, waiting, made her decide that the truth mattered more than being polite. "Yes, sir," she said. She didn't finish reading it. A muscle in Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He turned back to Victoria. "We have a policy in this company. Every application gets reviewed. Fully. That's not optional, that's not a suggestion. That's the standard my father built this company on, and it's the standard I intend to keep." "Nathaniel, it's one applicant," Victoria said, an edge creeping into her voice now, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I have 15 more interviews today, a wedding to plan that you've barely shown up for, and frankly, I don't have time to." "That's not an excuse to humiliate someone," Nathaniel said, cutting her off, something he rarely did, especially not in front of others. "This is someone's effort, someone's time. You don't get to destroy that because you're having a bad day." The room went silent. Maya sat frozen, feeling like she was witnessing something far bigger than her own small tragedy, a crack in a relationship that had clearly been fracturing long before she ever walked through that door. Victoria's cheeks flushed, embarrassment and anger warring across her face. "Fine," she said tightly. "I'll review it again." "There's nothing left to review," Nathaniel said, gesturing at the shredded pieces. "You tore it apart." He turned to Maya then, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry. This isn't how this company treats people, and it's not how you should have been treated today." Maya swallowed hard, still trying to process what was happening. She had walked in expecting rejection, maybe even expecting to be talked down to. She'd experienced that plenty of times in her life. But she hadn't expected an apology. Especially not from a man like this, in a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. "It's okay," she said softly, even though it wasn't, not really. "I understand. It's a competitive position. I'll figure something else out." "No," Nathaniel said more firmly this time. "You applied. You deserve a real interview. Today." Victoria's eyes widened. "Nathaniel, you can't be serious. You're the CEO. You don't conduct entry-level interviews." "I'm making an exception," he said simply, and something in his tone told everyone in the room that the conversation was over. He gestured toward the chair across from his own office, which Maya could see through the glass partition just beyond Victoria's. An office even larger, with a view that stretched across the entire skyline. "Come with me. Let's talk properly." Maya glanced at Victoria, who was staring daggers into the side of Nathaniel's face. Her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself together by force. There was something in Victoria's expression that went beyond simple annoyance at being overruled. It looked almost like fear. Maya didn't understand it yet, but she would soon enough. She followed Nathaniel out of the office, down the hallway, and into a space that felt like an entirely different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A single framed photograph on the desk. An older man who bore a striking resemblance to Nathaniel, clearly his father. Books lined one wall, not for show, but clearly read and reread, spines cracked and pages dog-eared. "Please sit," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He sat down across from her, folding his hands, and for the first time since she'd stepped into the building, Maya felt like someone was actually seeing her. Not judging her clothes, not dismissing her background, just seeing her. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Not what you think I want to hear. The truth." And so, hesitantly at first, and then with growing confidence, Maya did. She told him about her parents, both gone now. Her father from a construction accident when she was 19. Her mother from illness 3 years later. She told him about raising her younger brother Arjun alone, about working 2 jobs just to keep him in school, about the night she went without dinner so he wouldn't have to. She told him about her dream. Not a grand, extravagant dream, just the simple wish for stability. Place where hard work was recognized. A place where she wasn't invisible. Nathaniel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance at the clock, didn't do any of the things Maya had expected a busy CEO to do during a conversation with someone as unimportant as her. When she finished, there was a long pause. "You're overqualified for the position you applied for," he finally said. Maya blinked, startled. "I what? The housekeeping role is entry-level. But the way you just described managing multiple households, budgets, schedules, and responsibilities while raising a child on your own, that's project management. That's leadership. You've been doing it your whole adult life. You just never had the title for it." Maya didn't know what to say. No one had ever framed her life that way before. As evidence of skill rather than just survival. "I'm going to offer you a position," Nathaniel continued. "Not the one you applied for. Something in our facilities management team with room to grow. Better pay. Real benefits. A path forward." Tears finally broke free from Maya's eyes, but this time they weren't from humiliation. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Nathaniel's expression grew thoughtful, almost distant, as though her question had touched something deeper than she realized. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said quietly. "Gave me a chance when everyone else saw me as just another name on a list. I don't forget things like that." Maya had no idea in that moment just how significant those words would become, or how the decision Nathaniel made that day would collide, violently and unexpectedly, with a crumbling relationship happening just down the hallway. Because Victoria Harrison was not a woman who took being overruled lightly. And what Maya didn't know yet was that Victoria's fury wasn't really about a torn application at all. It was about someone else entirely. The days that followed were the busiest and most disorienting of Maya's life. She started her new position within the week, in the facilities management department on the 9th floor, working under a kind but no-nonsense supervisor named Priya, who took one look at Maya's work ethic and decided, within days, that she'd found a rare gem. Maya arrived early, stayed focused, learned quickly, and treated every task, no matter how small, with the same seriousness she'd once given to scrubbing floors in mansions she'd never be invited to sit in. But it wasn't just the job that was different. It was the way people looked at her now. The receptionist who'd once eyed her with dismissal now smiled and waved her through. Co-workers who barely acknowledged new hires took the time to introduce themselves, to explain the coffee machine, to invite her to lunch. And then there was Nathaniel. He didn't hover. He didn't make her feel like a charity case. But every so often, he would stop by the 9th floor under some professional pretense, checking on a project, reviewing a report, and their eyes would meet across the room, and something unspoken would pass between them. Gratitude on her part. Something Maya couldn't quite name on his. She told herself it was nothing. He was engaged after all. To Victoria Harrison of all people. The same woman who had torn Maya's application apart without a second thought, and who now looked at Maya in the hallways with an expression so cold it made the air feel colder too. Maya tried to stay out of Victoria's way entirely. She kept her head down, did her work, and reminded herself daily that she was lucky. Luckier than she had any right to expect, and that gratitude, not entanglement, was the only appropriate response to what had happened. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 3 weeks into her new role, Maya was asked to deliver a set of urgent documents to the executive floor. Priya was out sick, and no one else was available. Maya took the elevator up, papers clutched carefully to her chest this time, taking no chances with anything getting damaged or lost. She rounded the corner toward Nathaniel's office and stopped short. Victoria was there, standing just outside his door, her voice low but sharp, clearly mid-argument with someone on the phone. Maya, not wanting to interrupt, pressed herself slightly against the wall, intending to wait until the call ended. But then she heard the words that changed everything. "I don't care what it costs," Victoria hissed into the phone. "Just make sure the results say what we need them to say. Nathaniel cannot find out about the accounts before the wedding. Once we're married it won't matter. But if he finds out now, everything falls apart." Maya's blood ran cold. She wasn't sure what she was hearing exactly, but the tone, the secrecy, the desperation in Victoria's voice, it was unmistakable. Whatever this was, it wasn't innocent. She should have walked away. She should have pretended she'd heard nothing, delivered her papers, and gone back downstairs to the safety of her own small corner of the company. That would have been the smart thing to do. The safe thing. But before she could decide, Victoria turned and saw her standing there. The color drained from Victoria's face for just a moment before fury replaced it. She ended the call abruptly and stormed toward Maya, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. "What did you hear?" Victoria demanded, her voice a razor-edged whisper. "Nothing," Maya said quickly, holding up the folder of documents like a shield. "I'm just delivering these for Priya. I wasn't listening." "Don't lie to me," Victoria snapped, stepping closer, close enough that Maya could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something sharper. Anxiety maybe, or fear. "I know your kind. Always looking for an angle. Always trying to worm your way into places you don't belong. Did Nathaniel put you up to this? Are you spying for him?" "No. I swear I was just—" "Listen to me very carefully," Victoria said, her voice dropping even lower, dangerous now in its quietness. "You will forget whatever you think you heard. If a single word of this reaches Nathaniel before the wedding, I will make sure you regret it. I will make sure you lose this job and every job like it in this entire city. Do you understand me?" Maya's heart pounded so hard she was certain Victoria could hear it. She nodded, unable to trust her voice, and practically fled down the hallway, documents still clutched tightly to her chest, Victoria's threat echoing in her ears with every step. She spent the rest of that day in a fog, barely able to focus on her work, replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. What accounts was Victoria talking about? What was she hiding from Nathaniel? And more importantly, should Maya say anything at all? She had just gotten this job. His chance. The first real stability she'd had in years. Getting involved in whatever secret Victoria was protecting felt like exactly the kind of risk that could destroy everything Nathaniel had given her. But there was another feeling gnawing at her too, something harder to ignore. Nathaniel had shown her more kindness in one conversation than most people had shown her in years. He'd looked at her life and seen strength instead of pity. He'd trusted her enough to give her a real chance. Didn't he deserve honesty in return? Didn't he deserve to know that the woman he was about to marry was hiding something serious enough to threaten a stranger over? Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in the small apartment she shared with Arjun, staring at the ceiling, turning the decision over and over in her mind like a stone she couldn't put down. By morning, she still didn't have an answer. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't going to give her much more time to decide, because 2 days later, everything came crashing down in a way none of them could have predicted. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, during what should have been an ordinary executive meeting. Maya was in the facilities office reviewing maintenance schedules, when Priya rushed in, eyes wide, phone in hand. "You need to see this," she said, turning her screen toward Maya. "It's all over the internal channels." Maya's stomach dropped as she read the headline of the internal company memo that had just been circulated to every employee. An emergency shareholder meeting had been called, effective immediately, regarding irregularities discovered in departmental budget allocations under HR Director Victoria Harrison. Word spread through the building like wildfire. Within an hour, everyone knew, or thought they knew, that Victoria had been diverting funds from a company charitable initiative, one specifically designated for employee hardship grants, into a private account. The very fund meant to help people like Maya, people who had fallen on hard times and needed emergency support, had been quietly siphoned for months. Maya sat frozen at her desk, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. This was what Victoria had been hiding. This was the phone call Maya had overheard. Not a small secret. Not a minor embarrassment before a wedding. A calculated theft from the very people the company was supposed to protect. And Maya had known, or at least suspected, something was wrong and she'd said nothing. The guilt hit her like a physical weight. She thought about all the employees who might have applied for those hardship grants and been quietly denied, never knowing the money had been there all along, just diverted elsewhere. She thought about herself just weeks earlier, desperate enough to accept any position, any chance at stability, and how close she had come to depending on a system that had been secretly hollowed out. By the end of the day, the building was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Tense, electric, full of whispered conversations in hallways and stairwells. Maya heard fragments as she moved through the office. Victoria had been placed on immediate leave pending investigation. Nathaniel had personally requested an independent audit weeks earlier. Apparently he'd noticed inconsistencies himself, long before Maya had overheard anything. That detail made Maya's breath catch. Nathaniel had already suspected something. He'd been quietly investigating his own fiancée for weeks, all while maintaining a professional, composed exterior, all while Victoria had been growing more desperate and more reckless by the day. Desperate enough to tear apart a stranger's job application in a fit of misplaced rage, desperate enough to threaten Maya into silence. Maya finally understood the flicker of fear she'd seen in Victoria's eyes that very first day, when Nathaniel walked into the office and found the torn application scattered across the desk. It hadn't been about the application at all. Victoria had been unraveling for weeks, and Maya had simply been an unlucky bystander who happened to witness the fracture. Late that evening, as most of the office had emptied out, Maya was called into Nathaniel's office. Her heart hammered the entire walk up, uncertain whether she was about to be thanked, questioned, or blamed for not speaking up sooner. Nathaniel looked exhausted when she entered. Not the composed, controlled man she'd met weeks earlier, but someone clearly worn down by a day of devastating revelations about the person he'd planned to spend his life with. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, the same chair she'd sat in during their very first real conversation. Maya sat, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Nathaniel, I need to tell you something. I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry I didn't." He looked up, surprised. "What is it?" Haltingly, Maya told him everything. The phone call she'd overheard outside his office, Victoria's desperate words about the accounts, the explicit threat Victoria had made against her if she said anything before the wedding. She braced herself for anger, for disappointment, for questions about why she hadn't come forward immediately. Instead, Nathaniel sat back slowly, processing her words, and something in his exhausted expression softened into quiet understanding. "She threatened you," he said. "It wasn't a question." Maya nodded. "She said she'd make sure I lost this job. Any job like it anywhere in the city." I was scared. I'd just gotten this position, the first real chance I'd had in years, and I didn't know what to do. "You don't have to explain yourself," Nathaniel said gently. "You were protecting yourself from someone with real power to hurt you. That's not a failure, Maya. That's survival. I understand that better than you might think. But if I'd said something sooner, maybe." "The audit was already in motion," Nathaniel interrupted softly. "I'd suspected discrepancies for almost 2 months. What you heard just confirmed what I already feared. Nothing about this is your fault." Maya felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders, though the guilt lingered, stubborn and heavy. "I'm still sorry I didn't tell you immediately. You deserved to know." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something between admiration and something warmer, something he seemed to be actively holding himself back from. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Of course. Why did you eventually decide to tell me? You could have stayed silent. You could have protected yourself and let the audit run its course without ever getting involved." Maya thought about the question carefully before answering, because she wanted to give him the truth, not just a comfortable answer. "Because you gave me a chance nobody else would have," she said slowly. "You looked at my life and saw something worth investing in, instead of something to dismiss. I couldn't repay that by staying silent while you were about to marry someone capable of doing what she did. Not just to the company, but to people who needed that help the most. You deserved honesty, even if it was scary, even if it was late." Nathaniel's expression in that moment shifted into something Maya had never seen from him before. Something raw, something that looked almost like relief, as though her words had confirmed something he desperately needed to hear. "Victoria and I have been over for a long time," he admitted quietly. "Longer than either of us wanted to admit. I think deep down part of why I threw myself so completely into this company was because I didn't want to face how wrong things had become at home. This," he gestured vaguely at the papers on his desk, the scandal unfolding around them. "This is painful. But it's also clarity. And clarity, even when it hurts, is better than pretending." Maya didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle between them, something significant shifting in the air, though neither of them named it out loud. The wedding, everyone in the building already knew without needing to be told, was over before it had ever truly happened. But what came next, for both Maya and Nathaniel, was something neither of them could have anticipated when this whole story began with a torn piece of paper and a stranger's shattered hope. The weeks following Victoria's dismissal were a period of quiet transformation for the entire company, and for Maya in ways she was only beginning to understand. The investigation confirmed what everyone had feared. Victoria had systematically redirected funds from the employee hardship program over the course of nearly a year, using the money to cover personal debts she'd kept hidden from Nathaniel, debts accumulated from a lifestyle that had spiraled further out of control than anyone realized. She was terminated immediately. The engagement publicly and permanently ended, and the legal proceedings that followed made headlines across the city's business press for weeks. Maya watched it all unfold from a respectful distance, grateful that her name never appeared in any of the public reporting, grateful that Nathaniel had protected her privacy even as his own life was dissected in the media. But something else was happening too, something quieter and slower, growing in the spaces between their occasional conversations in the hallway, their shared glances across crowded meeting rooms, the way Nathaniel always seemed to find a reason to stop by the facilities department whenever Maya was on shift. It was Priya who noticed it first. "He's here again," she teased one afternoon, watching Nathaniel pause outside their office door, ostensibly reviewing a maintenance report he clearly didn't need to review in person. That's the 4th time this week. He's just checking on operations, Maya said, though her cheeks warmed despite her best efforts to sound unaffected. Sure he is, Priya said with a knowing smile. Operations that happen to always coincide with your shift. Maya brushed off the comment, but she couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. Not into anything improper or unprofessional, nothing that crossed any lines given his position and hers, but something undeniably real nonetheless. Conversations that lingered longer than necessary. A warmth in his eyes that she found herself thinking about long after their interactions ended. She told herself repeatedly that it didn't matter, that even if something was there, it was inappropriate to dwell on it. He was the CEO. She was an employee who, just months earlier, had been scrubbing floors for a living. The gap between their worlds felt insurmountable, no matter how many kind words passed between them. But Nathaniel, it turned out, had other ideas. One evening, as Maya was preparing to leave for the day, he appeared at her desk, not in his usual composed professional manner, but with something almost nervous in his posture, an uncertainty that felt startlingly human on a man who commanded boardrooms without breaking a sweat. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. "Not for work. Just to talk." Maya nodded, curious and cautious in equal measure, and followed him to a quiet corner of the building's rooftop garden, a space she hadn't even known existed, tucked away above the executive floors, offering a view of the city skyline as the sun began its slow descent. "I wanted to thank you properly," Nathaniel began, standing at the railing, not quite looking at her. "For what you did. Telling me about Victoria. I know how much courage that took, especially after what she threatened. Not everyone would have done that." "I almost didn't," Maya admitted honestly. "I was scared. I thought about staying quiet more times than I'd like to admit." "But you didn't stay quiet," Nathaniel said, finally turning to look at her. "That matters more than you realize. You've shown me more integrity in the few months I've known you than I experienced in years with Victoria. That's not a small thing." Maya felt her pulse quicken under the weight of his gaze, unsure of where this conversation was heading, unsure if she wanted it to head somewhere she'd been quietly hoping for without fully admitting it to herself. "Nathaniel, I appreciate that. Truly. But I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything beyond what you've already given me. The job, the chance to prove myself, that was more than enough." "This isn't about owing you anything," he said quietly, taking a small step closer. "This is about something I've been trying to ignore for weeks because I told myself it was inappropriate, or too soon, or complicated given everything with Victoria. But I'm done pretending I don't feel it." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Feel what?" Nathaniel's expression was open now, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen from him before. Not the composed CEO, not the man who commanded rooms with quiet authority, but simply a man standing on a rooftop at sunset, admitting something that clearly terrified him. "I think about you more than I should," he said simply. "I find reasons to walk past your department that have nothing to do with facilities reports. I've spent the last several weeks telling myself it's inappropriate given the timing, given our positions, given everything that's happened. But every excuse I've made has started to feel less true and less important than what I actually feel." Maya stood there, overwhelmed, the city lights beginning to flicker on below them as the sky deepened into shades of orange and purple. Part of her wanted to protect herself, to remind him, and herself, of everything standing between them. The power imbalance, the recency of his broken engagement, the sheer impossibility of a story like this actually happening to someone like her. But another part of her, the part that had walked into this building months ago with nothing but hope and a torn application, refused to dismiss what was happening simply because it felt too good, too unlikely, too much like the kind of thing that only happened in stories. I feel it too, she admitted quietly. I've been trying not to, for exactly the reasons you just listed. But I feel it too. Nathaniel's expression broke into something Maya hadn't seen from him before. Genuine, unguarded relief. The kind of smile that transformed his entire face from composed executive into simply a man who just heard something he desperately needed to hear. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for, he said carefully. I know this is complicated. I know there are things we need to figure out. How to handle this professionally. How to make sure it never feels like anything but genuine to either of us. But I wanted you to know. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel it. Maya smiled, the first truly unguarded smile she'd allowed herself in weeks, maybe months. Then let's figure it out together. But even as that moment unfolded, neither of them yet knew about the final piece of this story. A piece that would arrive just weeks later, one that would reveal something about Maya's own past that neither of them could have anticipated, and that would tie the beginning of this story to its ending in a way that felt almost impossible to believe. It happened almost by accident, 3 weeks after that conversation on the rooftop. Nathaniel had invited Maya to his family estate for the weekend, a quiet, low-key gathering meant to introduce her, gently and privately, to his father, Richard Harrison, the company's founder and Nathaniel's greatest source of guidance and wisdom throughout his life. Maya arrived nervous beyond words, terrified of making a wrong impression, terrified that Richard would see her the way Victoria once had, as someone who didn't belong in rooms like this. But Richard Harrison, it turned out, was nothing like Victoria. He was warm, unpretentious despite his wealth, and welcomed Maya with a kindness that immediately put her at ease. It was during dinner, as Richard asked Maya gentle questions about her background, her parents, her upbringing, that everything changed. You said your father worked in construction, Richard asked, something flickering behind his eyes. What was his name, if you don't mind me asking? Rajesh Sharma, Maya answered. He worked on several building projects downtown before the accident that took his life. Richard went very still, setting down his fork slowly, his expression shifting into something between shock and disbelief. Rajesh Sharma, he repeated quietly. The construction site on 5th and Main. Nearly 9 years ago. Maya's heart began to pound. Yes. How did you? That was one of our sites, Richard said. His voice thick with an emotion Maya couldn't quite place. One of the very first Harrison Enterprises development projects. There was an accident. A worker fell from scaffolding that hadn't been properly secured. It made headlines for weeks. A massive safety violation lawsuit followed, one that changed every safety protocol this company uses to this day. Maya sat frozen, memories of that horrific week flooding back. The phone call, the hospital, the funeral she could barely afford, the years of grief that followed. Your father's death, Richard continued, his voice growing quieter, more solemn, was the reason I personally overhauled every safety regulation across every Harrison Enterprises project nationwide. I promised myself that no other family would lose someone the way yours lost him because of our negligence. I've thought about that accident for 9 years. I never knew. I never had any way of knowing that his daughter would end up sitting at my dinner table. The room fell into stunned silence. Nathaniel reached for Maya's hand under the table. His own expression caught somewhere between shock and something deeper. A sense that the universe had woven together threads none of them could have predicted, connecting his family's greatest regret to the very woman who had walked into his company months earlier with nothing but a torn application and unshakable hope. There's something else, Richard said, his voice unsteady now. As part of the settlement following your father's accident, our company established a trust fund for the families of workers affected by safety violations on our sites. It was meant to provide for children who lost parents, to help with education, with stability, with exactly the kind of future your father would have wanted for you. That fund has been sitting untouched for 9 years because our legal team could never locate the surviving family members. You and your brother had moved, changed contact information, fallen through the cracks of a system that failed you in more ways than one. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by grief and disbelief in equal measure. Grief for a father she still missed every single day. Disbelief that some fragment of justice, however delayed, had finally found its way to her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "All this time there was a fund waiting for you," Richard confirmed gently. "For you and for Arjun. Enough to secure both of your futures completely. His education, your stability, everything your father would have wanted to provide for you both." Nathaniel squeezed her hand, his eyes glistening with emotion of his own. "Maya, do you understand what this means? This isn't charity. This isn't a gift. This is what should have been yours 9 years ago, if the system hadn't failed you." Maya thought about everything that had led her to this moment. The years of struggle, the nights without dinner so Arjun could eat, the desperate hope she'd carried into that office months ago, the humiliation of watching her application torn apart, the fear of Victoria's threats, the courage it had taken to speak the truth anyway. Every piece of pain, every sacrifice, every moment of quiet desperation had led her here, to a table where a man who had unknowingly caused her greatest loss was now, through circumstances neither of them could have engineered, offering a piece of restoration she never imagined possible. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to find bigger words for something this significant. "Thank you for not forgetting him. Thank you for caring enough to change things, even after all this time." Richard reached across the table and covered her hand with his own, weathered and sincere. "Your father's death changed this company forever, Maya. It's only right that his daughter finally receives what was always meant for her." That night, as Maya stood on the balcony of the Harrison estate, looking out over grounds more beautiful than anything she'd ever imagined standing on, Nathaniel joined her, wrapping his arms gently around her from behind. "I know this is a lot to process," he said softly. "The money, the history, everything that's happened between us in just a few short months." Maya leaned back against him, watching the stars begin to emerge over the horizon. "It is a lot, but it doesn't feel like too much. It feels like everything is finally settling into the place it was always supposed to be." "Even us?" Nathaniel asked quietly. Maya turned in his arms to face him, smiling through the last of her tears. "Especially us. Because sometimes the cruelest moments in our lives, a torn application, a moment of humiliation, a stranger's careless act of contempt, end up being the exact doorway that leads us toward everything we were always meant to have." Maya had walked into that building as a stranger nobody wanted to see. She was walking out of it now, months later, not just employed, not just secure, but finally fully seen. By a family, by a company, and by a man who had chosen her not out of pity, but out of genuine, hard-won respect. Sometimes life tears us down to our very last thread, takes our hope, our effort, our dignity, and rips it apart right in front of us, just like that application. But what feels like an ending is sometimes only the universe clearing space for something we could never have imagined on our own. Kindness, courage, and honesty always find their way back to us, even when the weight feels unbearable. If this story touched you, hit that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and which part of this story hit you the hardest? Don't forget to subscribe because we have so many more stories like this one coming your way. And if you haven't already, go check out our other videos. Trust me, you won't want to miss them. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never underestimate how far a little courage can take you.